they built stuff kind of good and bad back then anyway, but the wood selection was more, it was a little bit more random. It wasn't just the junk that you get these days for framing. It was like you could get some vertical grain, like just some beautiful quarter sawn stuff, old growth stuff in 2x4s. I've done kitchen remodels and like we've yanked out a wall and I'm like, I'm taking that. That's why I'm going to the dumpster. And it's like you mow that stuff down and it's better than what you can get. But yeah, it's out there, and when you know this, you tend not to do more dumpster diving than just throwing stuff in the dumpster.
Exactly. Besides, he offer up and Craigslist 2 spots I have gone to.
Afterwards, if anybody's looking for some lumber, there's a bungalow on 22nd and Q Street that I passed on the way here that had a big pile of what looked like old wood. So if any of you are looking, if you got some space in your basement, that'd be a place to check.
But you also have to have the space, and then you have to have the machining to mill it properly, and the time. And if you have a day job, that gets kind of tricky.
So that brings me to the question of, if you don't have the equipment on break your parting bead, and new home has got stuff that's too small, what other options do we have?
I said this the last time we had this seminar, and I'm going to say it again. Befriend a woodworker. That's the smartest thing you can do. Because a lot of the components that you would need for this project, like making this, if you have a router table and you have a planer, it's not hard. It doesn't take that long. But you're not going to go out and spend $1,500 on a router table. Like, yeah, you could buy a lot of stuff just to make one little piece. So befriend a woodworker and pay them really well. Buy them a sandwich, you know.
What kind of gear do you drink?
Exactly.
So I called around town and I couldn't find anyone that would do custom trim to match the trim I have, other than Burnett, and then that's a setup fee.
Yeah.
Wouldn't Valleywood Window do it?
Maybe.
Okay.
Don't know with them.
He didn't do trim as much.
But, you know, the important thing to know is that regardless of who you can find to do it, understand what you want to have done, and understand like that it has to be exact, that they can't just like fudge it a little bit because they can fit more of it in that board. It's like, and it has to be, you know, the right kind of wood, and it has to be cut the right kind of way. That makes all the difference, whoever does it. So, and it's kind of, the good thing is, yeah, if you don't have the tools, befriend a woodworker, but your knowledge of knowing what you want is opens up a lot of communication that you can have with the person doing the work. So, all right. So, where are we? Okay, let's get. We're going to talk finishes, and then we're going to talk ropes, and we're going to take a little 10-minute break. This is all sanded. Pulleys are all good. Our door's good. We have new parting beads. Oh, here's another trick with parting beads. Just 'cause there's always tricks with the parting beads. This edge that has all the paint on it, and it might be dinged up from like bad situations opening and closing. If you clean out the edges pretty good, get the bulk of the paint off, but not all of it, you can swap these because they're the same size. And the angle for your cell, you can put that over there, and that side is brand new and it doesn't have anything. So you do a little sanding on that, and it's fantastic. This one, as you can see, has all the paint on the upper side. So you can just, you know, flip that guy around and swap these over, and it saves a lot of time. So if your parting beads are in decent shape and you get them out in decent shape, it's a smart way to go if you don't have a bunch kicking around to just use those kind of tricks. So we talked about the type of rope. Now we're going to talk about how to actually re-rope a window. We're also going to assume that this pulley is in good shape, and just for kicks, we'll just re-rope this one. Weights. Nice shirt. Well, let's get everything apart before we talk about weights. These are sheet metal shears. they work really well for a couple things, the weather stripping, which we'll talk about, and also just the ropes. So I just cut the knot off, just to make it easy. You don't want to try to untie it unless you have to. I also try to just not let it drop, because if you have a big window with big weights, it's bad for morale. It's not going to cause any real problems, but it might just kind of make you on edge. I'm just going to grab it in there. And you pull the weight out through the door there. Take the old rope off. We're going to assume that this is broken and it's like filled up with paint. It's 100 years old. There are different types of weights, and here's a style where it's easy. It just goes through the top and just has a regular square knot, and that's fine. I don't see that one that often. I tend to see this side, and I'll show you the knot that I like to use. The size of the weight, that has a big 4. This one is stamped with a 5. So, one of the things about this window is, it's pretty obvious, at some point, somebody swapped out this weight, because they should all be consistent. And the way you determine your size is you want to weigh the window and divide it in half. So each weight is going to be half of the window. I was doing a class at a Silmar where I was talking about my trick of you put this on a bathroom scale and you get it to where it like stays up just long enough to where you can get the number. And then the other instructor was like, I just stand on the scale at the window. It's a lot smarter than the way I came up with it. So I recommend that instead of trying to do it this way. That tends not to work. And let's talk about something else real quick. We're going to talk about weather stripping, but since we're talking about the weights, I've seen people locally say that they can add dual pane windows to the old openings, and everything's great. Everything, get dual pane. Oh my God, everything's just fantastic. I just don't trust it, and I also don't think it's necessary. These windows were designed with this weight size. If you
I had a house where they did that previous summer, and the windows just didn't fit right afterwards. They spent tons of money, everybody's like, wow, yeah, that stuff, they didn't close right.
yeah.
They didn't operate the way they should.
I think one of the big problems is that by adding that extra glass, you're adding more weight to the window. You'd have to change out all your weights. And if your opening wasn't designed for larger weights, that's going to cause problems with its function. Also, the profile of your window sash is made to where you have one piece of single strength in there, and then you have enough glazing to where it's going to be able to be maintained. I just don't trust it. It's altering the original design. I don't like that.
Are you talking about replacing the sash or just replacing the glass?
They replace the sash,
Okay.
or they do something with the glass, just the glass.
I've heard of them routing out or doing a bit deeper notch in the wood for the
I don't like
thick
it.
window.
I just don't like it.
Then you have to rebalance the weights.
Yeah.
Or put, we call it, where it jams, where
Yeah.
you're not even using the weights anymore.
Yeah. But going back to the whole energy efficiency side of this, and I'll talk about weather stripping, but if you properly keep that glazed and painted with single strength glass in Sacramento, it doesn't get that hot or that cold here to where, it's too much of an issue. And if 85% of your energy inefficiency is caused from other things than your windows, if your window's properly tuned up and weather stripped, why do you need dual pane? And if you really want to dual pane, you can take the old style window screens and you can put plexiglass on them, and then the distance between your glass is more like this as opposed to like that, and it's a better dual pane without altering the original design at all. So
Well, I think, I heard the punchline, the weather doesn't go through glass, it goes around the edges.
Yeah, and I really think this weather stripping setup works pretty well. So anyway, getting back to the roads, trying to keep us a little bit on a linear way of thinking here. I talked about expensive tools, but I'm going to talk about one of the cheapest ones that is one of the best. If you've ever worked on an old window, if you try, put that through the pulley and have it go down to where you can get it down here, it's never going to work. It gets caught up on everything and it never works. You can try and you can spend forever trying to make it trying to make it work. It's not going to happen. If it does, and I have had on small windows, I'm like, God, it's just a bathroom window, I can do it. Sometimes it would work, but it takes like 5 times as long, so who wins? So everybody has their own way of doing it. Of course, I've tangled this up. Jeez. Pardon me. Go down to the hardware store, buy some of this chain, and grab some twine. And all you need is enough weight to get you through there. And all I do is just, everybody has their own way. It's just the way that works for me. Just tie a long square knot, and just kind of wrap around a couple times. Once again, we're going to assume that pulley is fantastic and in great shape, working really well. And you'll get the chain, pop on through there, all's well. It's worth the extra time. This costs like $3. It's so worth it. So when I was teaching this class at Silmar, the other instructor, he's done a bunch of windows too, and he did windows on the Bethel Mansion. And like I said, I just know the ways that I've learned how to do things. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm a fisherman, so I went down and I got this fishing weight, works really well. I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. He's like, here, take one, because I built like 5, because you always forget one somewhere when you're doing this work. So that's another option too, if you know any fishermen. It might cost $6, who knows? So this is the knot that I use. It's as one of the knots that they used 100 years ago, because I've seen this knot on original windows before. I think it's a half hitch, but you come through, you come around this way. So through, around this way, back around, down through there, kablam. The beautiful thing about this knot, it tightens itself, and it also puts the sash cord in the middle of the weight. So, now one of the big questions is, how long do you make it? Like I said, I'm not really a math and science person, so I try to stay away from numbers. But if that's going to be my lower sash, I don't like to have both of the weights in the same place when the window's closed, because as it's moving, it's going to like hit and get all weird. It's nice to have, since your lower sash, the bottom sash is going to be, the weight's always going to be higher. You want to have it to where it's going to comfortably be right around in there, and you want your knot about where where it's going to be on your sash. So you can measure it and go on that if you want. I just tend to go like, yeah, it's going to be right around there, so, So right around there works. I've also found for a normal size window, if you just tend to not let it rest entirely, both of them, because they're offset when they're closed, tends to work. So, I'll just take a little bit more for the knot. Just cut it off. And usually that works pretty well. You can overthink it, but
There's just a simple knot,
that, yeah, just a square knot.
square knot.
Unless you have the type where you need to go through the side of the sash and come back out the hole, then sometimes I'll just like, do a really loose knot up high, finish the work that I'm doing, and then deal with that at the end when I'm going to put it in. Make a clean cut, get it through that hole, take some nose pliers, pop it back through, and then tie it, which is tricky if you're trying to balance this thing without making it fall. That's just some logistical stuff that you need to sort through, but the concept is pretty clear. So, we have new ropes, everything's stripped. We're gonna talk finishes. Traditionally, these areas were linseed oil, pretty much just linseed oil. Sometimes it'd be linseed oil with wax on there. I'm a traditionalist, I use linseed oil. Here's the interesting side of that. You have your upper window sash on this track, and then you have your lower window sash on this track. This section from here to there on both sides is always exposed on the outside. I've seen some where they were just, where linseed oil was on there, and then they were never painted, and they crack, and then things get bad. I've seen them painted. People like myself aren't gonna maintain linseed oil because you'd have to do it like twice a year on every single window. You're just not gonna do that. I also don't like the idea of doing paint there because if you think about all the paint layers that were gunked up on your windows, I think about the building for the next 100 years, not just like the next 10 until I sell it or do something like that. So I like to keep it stained grade and then I also think when the house gets painted, if it's all stained grade, the next house painter is gonna be like, I'm not gonna paint that, it's got varnish on it. So I'll just keep it the way it is, I'll just paint all this other stuff, which is what you want. So I didn't bring any, but I put it on the list. I use this quality Swedish varnish called Sickens, and it's just a great exterior varnish. And I just like have a little quart, take a little brush, and just do this section with the Sickens. And it doesn't matter what your color scheme is, an old house, it tends to just look right. I think that's a good contemporary compromise. It's not historically accurate, but I think it's a good compromise. And I think it kind of sets a precedent for like maintaining it well in the future.
So is that on top of the linseed oil?
No, I just
Or
do
glue
the
it.
varnish here on
Yeah.
where the exterior exposure is going to be, and then everything else in linseed oil.
Okay.
Okay, how are we doing on time? Doing all right.
So just back up a little bit on, there's two tracks, and you only do the exposed on the outside track on the lower half. Is that right? That's the only place you put varnish?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you put everything together, you can even wait till you're all done. Do the linseed oil from there and just leave that bare. When you get the window done, you can be like, oh yeah, that's where the linseed, or that's where the varnish goes. It'll make a lot more sense when the windows are tight. So weather stripping. Another thing I don't like to see is, I guess felt's okay. I don't like rubber stuff. I don't like sticky back anything. Those kind of products that you get at your building supply store, they're not gonna last. Maybe 20 years. But like I said, I like to think in terms of like the next 100 years, not the next 10 years until I sell the house. A lot of windows in California did not have any weather stripping originally because California. and they didn't have issues like we have now 100 years ago. So the 100-year time period, and I'm using that as a general term, it might be 130, it might be 80, but that time period of 100 years, houses settle, you know, the frames might get a little wonky and not as square with the sashes. Your sashes loosen up a little bit. Things start to rattle. And, you know, if you have any problems with your glass, it's like, there's a lot of areas where air can just get through. You might even see daylight in spots, and it's just not good. If you use the correct weather stripping, and you do all this work on your window, even if things are a little bit off, you can eliminate that. So let's say that 15% energy inefficiency coming from your windows. I think with proper weather stripping and reducing that airflow, you may not get it perfect. You may not get it perfectly tight, but it's going to seal a lot more air out than it did before. And you can take that 15% down to like, you know, 2% or 3%. I think you could do a lot with it. And also another thing to keep in mind is that if you're looking at your whole structure, when they built houses 100 years ago, and when they built these windows 100 years ago, everything was designed more to breathe. And these days, everything is designed to be hermetically sealed. And they add all the you know, controlled air and those kind of environments. The windows don't work on an old house because they don't breathe. And you tend to have more like mold and condensation between the panes of glass and all these issues. But if you weather strip an old vintage window, you may not get all of the air out, but you're going to get so much out to where it's like pretty dang efficient. You're not going to have the rattling, you're not going to have that airflow. It's pretty great. The two types of weather stripping that I love, both come from the same place, Killian Hardware, put it on that list. It's just a small place in Pennsylvania, but all the window nerds I talk to, they all use the same stuff. It's basically spring bronze, where you have a flat edge, and then it has a spring to it, and V bronze, you know, because it's shaped like a V. I've used both. I'll continue to use both. I like them both. I don't know which one's better. I think there are circumstances where I tend to use this more, and circumstances where I will use this more. Oftentimes, I did this whole window using the spring bronze, just because, and it's pretty self-explanatory when you see it, because you nail it on the flat edge, and then you have this, which kind of like follows any wonkiness with your window. And it's also a metal surface, so it slides smoothly. And because it fills up any weird gap, it's going to like keep that airflow from going that way. It's great. I think I know John and I were talking about this.